Thanks. Well, I'm the business development rep for Northwest Minnesota, and also the workforce strategy consultant for Northwest Minnesota. I Sue Crockett came to our business development team a while back and gave a presentation about the resources and support that she can provide to businesses who are transitioning to an employee-owned model. And in our region, Northwest Minnesota, but throughout the state and the country, we have been dealing with this labor shortage issue for quite some time pre-COVID. And a lot of it has been driven by the retirement of the baby boomer population. But beyond the labor shortage, this retirement, this huge shift in our demographics, the demographics of our labor force, is also leading to a kind of a crisis for business succession. A lot of business owners are going to be turning over their business and are not sure how they're going to do that exactly. And so, I thought I'd bring Sue here to talk to more folks about the support she provides. And she brought some of her partners along. Steve Eide here is here. He provides legal support to businesses who are making that transition. And Randy Graham is also here to talk a little bit about his company, Russ Davis Wholesale, and the process that they went through in that transition. So thanks for joining us. I'm going to pass it over to Sue to say a few words first, and she's going to take it from there. But if you have questions, this is very interactive. We have a pretty small group this morning, so feel free to just throw a question in the chat if you have one, or raise your hand. I think Sue will take questions throughout the presentation. We certainly make it conversational. So Sue, we'll pass it to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen and go into our PowerPoint. But as Chet said, we want to make this interactive. We want you to be able to ask questions. There's a chat box over on the side. And actually, chat, when I have the PowerPoint open, I don't see that. So if any other people join, can you see if others are waiting in the waiting room or are doing a chat? Can you see that? Or no? Are you just seeing my screen?
No, I can monitor both those things. No problem.
Okay, perfect. All right. So we are the Minnesota Center for Employee Ownership, and just give me a second here. So I'm Sue Crockett. I'm the executive director of the Minnesota Center. I spent 30 years working for the ESOP Association as the chapter executive for the Minnesota Dakotas and the Pennsylvania and Delaware chapters of the ESOP Association. And I transferred over to become the executive director of the Minnesota Center in January of 2020. And so I've been very immersed in the ESOP world and really believe in employee ownership, and have actually seen firsthand the impact that it has on companies and employees and communities. And we are just expanding our reach to worker-owned cooperatives and EOTs as well. Joining me today is Randy Graham. He's the Secretary Treasurer of Russ Davis Wholesale. He's going to be sharing his story of how the company became an ESOP and what that has meant to the owners when they were selling, and the employees and how that's benefited them and the community as well. And then Steve Eide, an attorney with Saul Ewing Arnstein Lehr in Minneapolis, has been working in the ESOP world for many, many, many years and is very experienced, and worked with Russ Davis when they were making their transition. So who are we, the Minnesota Center? We were created by the Employee Ownership Expansion Network, which is based out in Arlington, Virginia, to be the boots on the ground to educate business owners and professionals on the options of employee ownership. So now there are 9 centers across the country. Minnesota was the second one to be created. So the movement is there and the timing is right for what we are doing. We became a 501c3 in January of 2020. So we are just in our second year. We formed in, like I said, in January, and in March, COVID hit. So it was a very interesting first year, but that allowed me to really connect with a lot of different organizations and individuals and make them aware of the work that MNCEO is doing. We're not a membership-driven organization, which means we provide everything for free. They're an unbiased source of information and resources because we just want to be able to educate business owners and professionals. So we are supported financially by professionals in the field and companies that support the philosophy that every employee should have wealth equity. So our mission is to turn the state of Minnesota into a place where every work person can also be an employee owner. We just recently did a data study with Project Equity on Minnesota and learned that there are 53,000 businesses in Minnesota owned by people over the age of 55 who will be exiting their business in 3 to 5 years. And the way it's going, maybe it'll be 1 to 3 years. But they really lack awareness or maybe even have misconceptions about the benefits of transitioning to an employee ownership model. And the result, they may choose a third-party sale, private equity, or in worst case, just close their doors. So again, we provide education, networking, resources to help guide a business owner through their options. So now I'm going to share a quick little video with you, which is kind of fun and is certainly available to anyone if they want to use it in a community meeting or a business meeting. Just kind of points out the issues we're facing today.
Most business owners don't have a succession plan, and that's a problem. In Minnesota, 25% of all business owners will reach retirement age in the next 10 years, and in the Twin Cities, 50% will retire in the next decade. What happens when they retire without a plan? We're afraid it will be nothing. Because 1/3 of retiring business owners report extreme difficulties finding a buyer, and 1/5 of them never find one at all. Their businesses, the jobs they create, the revenue they generate, and their legacies die when they retire. This is a crisis. At the Minnesota Center for Employee Ownership, we have a solution that many business owners don't know about. A way to preserve Minnesota businesses with equity and democracy. We're talking about employee ownership. And it's easier than you think. MNCEO promotes 3 methods of employee ownership. ESOPs, or employee stock ownership plans, worker-owned cooperatives, and EOTs, or employee ownership trusts. One of these structures could be a viable succession plan for your business, but you're probably wondering, is employee ownership possible? Can employees afford it? Will the owners receive a fair price for their business? We can help you find these answers. We offer free consultations with ESOP, co-op, or EOT specialists, and a network of valuable resources and information to connect you with specialized legal services, experienced financial professionals, business consultants, and employee ownership coaching and training. In this time of social change in Minnesota and beyond, employee ownership is a tool that brings power to the people. Your business could become one piece in the larger puzzle that is equity for all Minnesotans. Visit mnceo.org to get started, and we'll help you leave a lasting legacy that works for everyone.
Oops. So that's just a little ditty, I guess, that we put together that just helps point out the problems that are facing us as a state. And as I mentioned before, we did this project or data study with Project Equity that shows the impact of those business owners over the age of 55 in Minnesota. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Chet is going to share his and show you how the interactive map works. And this is on our website, mnceo.org. And I think it's a really very powerful tool. So Chet, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, sounds good, Sue. I thought this tool was really useful too. It really illustrates, the need for more succession planning, more connecting from those who are, trying to transition to retirement, to think about, what are their next steps and how to maintain that business in the community. I I saw we had a number of registrations here from Cass County today. And so if you hover over Cass County, for example, you can see the breakdown of industry and the number of employees affected in these businesses that are have owners who are over the age of 55 and might be thinking about either selling or, like Sue said, worst case, closing their business in the next few years. And so, you know, it's not just the business owner that's affected, although, you know, that's a big part of it. You know, employees are affected, the communities are affected. In Cass County, they rely a lot on retail, you know, because of the vacation traffic that they have there, the tourism. And, you know, that's a huge part here. If you look on this interactive tool, you can see there are 54 employees, but it's also a big portion of this business community that is trying to think about what are our next steps in terms of, like, are we going to remain in business? Are we going to sell? So I found this really helpful. I put the link to the tool in the chat so you can go and look in your community. We'll go over to Polk County. Here's another one. Manufacturing, you can see here. See, professional services is a big one. Construction. I think I saw somebody from, well, Russ Davis is in Wadena, I believe, right, Sue?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So Wadena County, again, a lot of retail stores that have older ownership. Professional services seems to be big everywhere. A lot of professional services aren't sure or are going to see some turnover and may not have a plan. So again, I put the link in the chat. Please go check it out. I think it's a really good way to kind of ground, you know, this idea, you know, and really kind of bring it home that this is something we need to be paying attention to in the region and in our communities. Pass back to you, Sue. Let me stop
Great.
sharing.
Thanks. Great. Get back to my PowerPoint. Yes, and definitely, you know, this is a great tool for you to use, and hope that it will be helpful in planning, whether you're a business owner or a professional or an economic development. It's important information. And again, that chat set out the link, but also it's on our website, MNCEO.org. So then, what are the options if an owner is interested in thinking about their exit planning? We're going to talk about three forms today: employee stock ownership plans, ESOPs, worker-owned cooperatives, and this is not your grocery store or dairy cooperative, but owned by the workers, and employee ownership trusts. So I'm going to begin by speaking about employee ownership trusts, and EOT. This is probably the least known of all three of the options for transitioning to employee ownership. It actually started in the UK. It's their form of an ESOP, really. And it's there are companies on the East Coast and the West Coast, but not so much in the Midwest. And so part of what we're trying to do too is just educate again. We're not selling any one option, but we want the information to be out there. So an EOT is a trust that holds some or all the shares of a company on behalf of the employees. So it offers simplicity and potentially a longer business legacy. A company that might choose an EOT is one that wants that company to remain independent. I have one story of a grocery wholesaler out on the East Coast that they had a very young workforce, and they wanted their business to stay independent because a lot of people were trying to buy them, and yet they wanted to reward their employees. So they formed an EOT, and how it actually works in a nutshell is that the employees benefit while they work there. So at the end of the year, when there's a 25%, I think, goes back into the business to invest in that, and then the balance is paid out to the employees. So it is really a qualified profit sharing plan. And a lot of ways they also might work that is to set up a 401k, but it is very different from when you're hearing about an ESOP. They do not have tax benefits, and it's not a retirement plan, but it does cost less than an ESOP to set up and maintain. And the business owner still receives fair market value for the business. And it's a way to keep the company independent and to actually share in the benefit of to the employees. So the employees are still going to be very engaged. They're going to care what happens to the company, and they're going to profit while they work there. So before we move on to worker cooperatives, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions. Chet, do you see any in the chat room?
So not a question necessarily, but we have Eric here, and Eric works for Real. They're a solar panel manufacturer in Cass County.
Mm-hmm.
And, he said he's been asking folks about EOTs. Eric, are you able to unmute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Eric.
You got some questions here. Feel free to just, chat.
Sure. Okay. So you said 25% goes back to the business, and then the rest would go to the employee owners. Does that mean basically you're looking at a 25% max growth each year?
Well, it's always going to depend on what the growth is each year. Yeah. I mean, so some years they may do better and some years they may not. It's really the way that it ends up being structured.
Okay.
And what I would be happy to do, Eric, is to put you in touch with someone who could help you go a little deeper with your questions.
I would love that.
If that would be a benefit. So
Yeah, thank you.
I will definitely do that. I'll make a note here because I've got you on the.
Yeah, there's kind of two paths forward that, well, we're basically moving on a path towards a cooperative, but we also have interest in the EOT. So I wanted to at least be, educate ourselves about it before we make a choice between one or the other.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're trying to do is put this out there so you can look at it. And then, let us help you get to those people that you can have a conversation with. So you don't have to go find these things on your own.
Perfect.
We can be there and help guide you. And like I said, we're not married to any one form of employee ownership. We just believe in employee ownership. So let me do that. I made a note of that, Eric. And let's go on then and let's learn a little bit more about worker-owned cooperatives.
Thank you.
And I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thanks, Sue. Good morning, everybody. Eric, it was great to see Real Solar on the attendee list. I've been driving by your place and back at least a couple of times a month for the last couple of years. I looked at your website, and it's real impressive, the kind of projects that you and your colleagues have been completing.
Thank you, Steve. Feel free to drop in sometime.
I may do that. So I'm going to talk about worker-owned cooperatives first, and then we'll talk about ESOPs after that. I'll tell you a little bit about what worker-owned cooperatives are, what their advantages are, and then quickly just kind of run through the steps that you'd take to create one, at least one method of it. Coming from Minnesota, we're all very familiar with cooperatives. I think our state is widely known for the number of cooperatives, but most of those are either consumer or producer co-ops, many in the agricultural sector. But we also have a very broad co-op statute that allows many types of businesses to be operated as co-ops. And what we're talking about here is a business that's owned and controlled by its workers. And those are two of the three main requirements of being a cooperative, is that it is member owned. And in this case, the members are employees. And it has to operate democratically with a one person, one vote sort of a governance structure. When we get to ESOPs, we're going to be talking a lot about federal laws, ERISA and the Internal Revenue Code, but co-ops really just need to comply with some minimum requirements of state law. When a co-op is formed, people buy in generally. And on the slide, I've indicated some results of a recent survey that said that of these 71 worker-owned co-ops, the buy-in could have been from anywhere from $0 to $18,000. But I think the important thing to note here is that half of those co-ops, the buy-in was $500 or less, and nearly all of them were $5,000 or less. And setting that amount, what needs to be put in by the employees to become members, is a function of several things. It's going to be, you look at what are the employees able to afford. You'd like to have them put enough in so that they feel like they really have a stake in the game. And it also depends on, what the balance sheet of the company looks like, how much capital they need to have on hand. Then the third component of a cooperative, besides the governance structure and the ownership, is what they do with their profits, their retained earnings. And there's sort of a three-step process that you go through in allocating that amount each year if there is a profit. The first step is to figure out how much is needed to reinvest in the business, and that goes into sort of an unallocated account, and that part is taxable to the co-op. But then the rest of it is going to be allocated to employees either as a cash payment to them or as a credit to a capital account that they maintain at the co-op. And so in a sense, if it goes into the capital account, that's something like a loan from the employee to the company, but in this case, the loan doesn't accrue any interest. And then when they leave the co-op, the members receive their capital allocation or capital account completely tax-free. Sue, let's go to the next slide. So the main advantages, as I see it, for a worker-owned cooperative is first, it has an immediate impact on the family and the community's wealth. ESOPs, because they're retirement plans, employees are really building up wealth that they'll spend, in the future during retirement. But with a worker-owned cooperative, employees generally will receive some amount as an additional payment at the end of each year. And like employee-owned trusts, worker-owned cooperatives are much cheaper to implement and significantly lower in the ongoing expenses each year as compared to an ESOP. And because they're simpler, there's less time that the company has to devote to administration of the plan and worrying about legal compliance matters, reporting to the government, that type of thing. They are suitable for businesses of any size. There's really no minimum size or number of employees that you need for a worker-owned cooperative. And there is a provision in the federal tax code that says that if the company is starting out as a C corporation or as a C corporation at the time the co-op is created, that the owner who sells out to the cooperative can get a deferral of taxes on any gain that they realize from that. Next slide. So to create a worker-owned cooperative, the first step is to create sort of a provisional board that does the planning, arranges financing to buy out the owners, and then they, at least in the example I'm using, they're establishing a new entity under the co-op statutes. And as part of this process, they're making all sorts of decisions about, what are the terms and conditions of being a member? How are we allocating rights and responsibilities between the members, the board, the managers? And all of this ends up getting packaged into their operating bylaws. And then there are two transactions that are, in a sense, independent, but they both have to happen in order for the co-op to exist. One is to have a purchase transaction that's negotiated between the co-op and the owners. And that's where it's important to, strike a balance between what the business can afford going forward as far as debt load, and what's a fair price to the owners who are leaving. And then the other transactions that are going on are between the employees and the co-op. And this is where they would be setting that price that we talked about already, and selling essentially just one share in the co-op to each of the interested employees. And this is a voluntary thing. You can't force the employees to be investing in the co-op. And as a result, you have some cooperatives where, maybe as many as half of the employees really aren't owners. And that might affect, how well the employee ownership model, helps the company in creating engagement by the employees. Then once all this is done, there has to be a cultural shift and a change in how decisions are made at the co-op. And these are generally involve having General Assembly meetings where everybody has a chance to learn about operating the company and helping make those decisions. And to make those meetings more effective, there's often a lot of education that goes on within the co-op model. So the types of entities that are best suited for a co-op really could be anything. Younger companies might be a good fit for a co-op, whereas that's not generally the case for ESOPs. In fact, many co-ops are actually startups and use that model from the very beginning. They can be any size, particularly companies that are under 30 employees. Co-ops are really the option I think that they should be looking at first. They can be in almost any industry. Although, if you look around the country at what co-ops are doing, a lot of them seem to be in industries where there's some sort of a social benefit. I'm thinking of food co-ops that maybe are supporting local farms. Actually, solar is a big area where there's a lot of co-ops. One of the most famous co-ops is a company in Colorado called Namaste Solar. And for them, their mission that they share is both to transform the way energy is produced and distributed, and also to transform the way that companies operate.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a question from the audience here. Mike Darger from the U of M is on, and he's curious, what's the largest co-op conversions that you've seen?
Well, I'll be honest, I have not been involved in co-op conversions myself to date. I'd love to get involved in doing those in the future. So I think I'll pass on that question. But one thing to keep in mind is that because of the way that governance within a co-op works, it does get more cumbersome as the company gets larger and larger. And there's sort of a general rule of thumb that once, and I think this is applied in the military, once you get beyond like 150 people, it becomes very difficult for them to operate as a cohesive group. And so, that might be, one thing to keep in mind, at least for worker-owned cooperatives.
Mike, did you have a follow-up question? Feel free to unmute if you'd like, if you do.
That's just interesting, Steve. I would say that we had a project last year, extension and the cooperative development services here in St. Paul. And one of the things Kevin Edberg likes to say is that the cut point between ESOPs and worker cooperatives, is probably below 100 employees. It can be very good for worker co-ops. ESOPs are, and you or Sue are going to talk about ESOPs, but worker. We've never really talked about co-ops that get into the hundreds. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I mean, worker cooperatives. There's a bunch of consensus, there's a bunch of democracy that has to happen, and the scaling factor, I think, is appropriate, what you're talking about.
Well, and I was just going to interject too. I think the thing that I always think about as far as a worker cooperative is when we're talking to business owners and say they only have 5 employees or 10 employees or 14 employees, an ESOP's not going to make sense for them. An EOT probably is not either, but a cooperative is one way that they can exit the business and still be able to sell. And one of the examples that I like is Happy Earth Cleaning, that the owners wanted to exit, but they had these employees that had been with them and it helped them build the business. And, in that business, the salaries are not that high in the cleaning business. And so they thought, this is a way we can give back to them. And so that has worked very well. And also, Happy Earth has said, that's really helped us in our marketing by saying we're employee owned. People do want to support that. So I think, if we're talking about smaller companies and smaller communities, I think that a worker co-op is really worth taking a look at. And I'm sure you agree. Go ahead.
Another thing about Happy Earth, and I live in Minneapolis, is that those folks were not baby boomers. Those were younger than baby boomers. And so the whole come on here is like about baby boomers, people who look like me, but there's other people in other age demographics, both older and younger than baby boomers who need to be exit planning. So Happy Earth is an example. I think they moved out of state.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did. That's a good point.
About them yesterday. They are younger people and they moved back to California because of they have aging parents in their 70s that they wanted to be closer to. But their reason for going to a co-op was that I think they felt that they treated employees in a special way and wanted to be able to continue that so that the employees, even though they're cleaning houses, but they can do it feeling good about the business being controlled by them and run by them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's a great example. So why don't we go real quickly to ESOP so that we can then get on to Randy and the story about Davis.
Yep, go for it.
So, we've talked already several times about the fact that ESOPs are qualified retirement plans, and they're a unique type. They're the only type of qualified plans that can borrow money and that can be invested almost entirely in the stock of one company. There's no diversification requirement. And just about all the attributes of an ESOP that I'm going to be running through here they stem from the fact that it is a qualified retirement plan. So for instance, there has to be a trustee or a group of trustees that actually own the stock. The employees don't become owners directly themselves. The qualified retirement plan rules require broad-based participation. So whereas a cooperative might not be as broadly owned because some employees decide not to buy in, but with an ESOP, you have to let everybody into the plan that meets certain minimum eligibility requirements. Usually it's 1 year of service with at least 1,000 hours of work. There's also vesting requirements for ESOPs so that at least by the end of 6 years of participation or of working for the company, the employees are fully vested in what they've accrued. The thing that the employees love about ESOPs is that it's all funded by the employer. It's usually a discretionary contribution amount that's put into the plan each year by the company. And it's not a matching contribution. A lot of times nowadays, we're so used to employer retirement money being dependent upon the employees putting in some amount of their own. Well, that's not the case here. Now, they are subject to IRS and Department of Labor oversight and reporting requirements. And it's more expensive than the other options that we're talking about to get the things set up. Hiring an outside trustee who's going to be independent of whoever is selling the stock is an important part of it, and that's expensive. But this is an option I think that most owners will find is really not that much more expensive, or could even be less expensive than selling to a third party. If you're if you're working through a business broker and you hire an attorney to help with that transaction, it's really not necessarily any cheaper than an ESOP. And because of the expense, you want to see at least 25 to 30 employees and even more than that, hopefully to cover or to spread out that expense. One thing that companies find when they become ESOP companies is that there's a very supportive community of similar companies that are always willing to help them figure out how to get the employees engaged, how to communicate to them about the ESOP. And there are national organizations like the one that Sue used to be involved with that are happy to help with that. Next slide. Okay, so the advantage of the ESOP, they're very flexible as to the timing and the size of the purchases. So if employers want to take some of their chips off the table, but continue to own the company for a while longer, they can do that with an ESOP. There's really no necessary change in the corporate structure, the way the governance of the company operates. The only difference is that you now have a shareholder who's a trustee of a retirement plan. Contributions to an ESOP are deductible, and a lot of the ESOPs in Minnesota and around the country are S corporations that are 100% owned by the ESOP, and those companies don't pay any federal, at least in Minnesota, no state tax on their profits. And ESOPs, like the other options we're talking about, if presented properly to the employees and to prospective employees, it can be a real powerful tool to help recruit and retain and get the most out of the employees. And then that same rule that I talked about with C Corp sales to cooperatives, that also applies to sales to an ESOP if certain conditions are met. So I think I'll stop there and hand it off to Randy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we could come back to this for any questions of all that, so that once you kind of have gotten the structure of it, and now you can hear about it in real life. So Randy,
Sue?
You take it away.
Say, Sue?
Yes.
Say, before you move on, you did have one question, and maybe this is something Steve can connect with Ben afterwards, but Ben is wondering if a typical governance structure of an EOT is similar to that of a co-op. And
The governance structure.
Yep. Ben, if you want to unmute, go ahead.
Yeah, Sue, as far as I know, EOTs are not required to have any sort of, democratic type of governance where the employees have a direct say. But I assume it really depends on how the trust is created and drafted.
Right. Yes, I would agree with that. And I guess again, too, I would like to, it was Ben, you said, that had that question?
Yep. Ben
Yeah,
Butcher.
I was just,
pronounced his name right.
I'm Eric's colleague, also at Real Solar here in Bacchus. And so I guess I'm just curious if it's typical within an employee-owned trust to have a board that's comprised of some employees and some other directors from outside the organization.
And I do believe, yes, that they do have a corporate structure, but the employees are still, whenever we talk about employee ownership, we don't really mean that the employees really own the company, or they're not managing the company. There's still a leadership team in place. They're still making the decisions for the company. But again, I would certainly be happy to put you and Eric in touch with a professional on EOTs that can help you go a little further with some of those questions.
Yeah, that'll be spectacular. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Oh, great. Okay.
Ben,
Russ.
Michael Starger also had a good response for you in the chat there. It's good information there. Although he qualifies and says he's not a lawyer, but
he's an expert in his own way. That's right.
He is, yeah.
Okay, just I guess for sake of time, if we're okay, because on timing, I know we started a little late, so I want Randy to have an opportunity to share his story, because I think it's really important to hear stories, because that's where the power really is. So we can circle back to at the end if there's time and people want to stay on, we're happy to do that.
Sound good.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So yeah, I'm with Russ Davis Wholesale. We are 100% employee owned. We're a produce distributor, and I can say manufacturer now. So we started in the upper Midwest, and basically we sell fresh fruits and vegetables to grocery stores. And as if everything over time, our product line has changed, where we had to get into the value added items where, you know, like the pre-cut fruit and pre-made salads and things. We just finished our 29th year as an ESOP. We're 100% employee owned. We're what they call a mature ESOP. So we're kind of beyond the setting up contributions and things. And we're actually paying people out. We have people retire every year and diversify. So our challenges are more, do we have enough money in the plan or cash in the plan to pay out the leaving retirees? So we're, like I said, we started in the upper Midwest. We got 5 distribution centers. Main one is in Wadena, which is our headquarters, Jamestown, North Dakota, Hammond, Maryland, La Crosse, Wisconsin. We have 2 production facilities, mostly because we couldn't sell a building in Inver Grove and we were growing. So we are running out of 2 buildings down the cities, and then one in Pueblo, Colorado, which we'll get into a little bit later. To increase the value of the ESOP, and so everybody's accounts continue to go up, the company has grown and made some acquisitions over the years. So we got into a trucking business. We were heavy transportation with bringing produce in, obviously, into Minnesota. So we have a trucking company that has about 30 trucks down in southwest Minnesota. That's called Blackjack Express. And then we also bought, mostly because the owners are trying to get out, so we purchased heavy diesel truck repair facilities, since we have a large fleet that we have to keep running. So we consider just paying ourselves versus sending it to somebody else. Although some places we do have to obviously send our trucks outside for repairs. But, so kind of not related to our core business, but just a kind of a growth offshoot. So next slide. So back in 1955, Russ Davis, who I didn't have the chance to meet either, but he started with his 1 truck, and he'd go down to the Twin Cities, go to the fruit market, fill it up, buy as much as he could, and come back and just stop at stores and sell things off the truck. So we've grown to, we have almost 700 employees now, and then a lot of temp labor. So close to 1,000 people combined, I guess, and out of the 8 facilities that we have, and it's all refrigerated. So it's 530,000 square feet approximately of refrigerated space. So it's grown quite a bit. Obviously the family really wanted to grow the company, and then now that's kind of our mission, is we have to grow to give a return to our employee owners. So, okay, next slide. This is I won't spend a lot of time on this, but this just kind of how, timeline of key points. Like I said, we started in 1955, and then in 1968 they actually built a warehouse in Wadena, and we're still in that same building today. It's been added on to multiple times, but then in 1971, this Jim Lehr was also a brother-in-law of Gary Davis and son-in-law of Russ Davis. So he joined in 1971, and he had more of an office background, and that's when they incorporated and started kind of selling off pieces to the different family members. And then in 91 is when they became an ESOP, partial. We get into that later too. Then in 98, Steve mentioned the tax benefits of an S Corp. They did that in 1998. And then Steve also mentioned you can sell over time, which is what the Davis family did. So in 2008, that's when we bought the family out, the remaining 25%. And then again, in 2010, that's where we had to change our direction a little bit and focus more on the value added stuff. We were buying that. So we thought, well, let's make it ourselves and do our own processing. So we started this Crazy Fresh brand. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but so started that in 2010, and that's really taken off. It's, it's kind of the thing we had to add to become advantage with against our competitors, because that's what people want, our consumers want now. So, and then in 2018, a national broker or a national grocer, Kroger, they're like the largest grocer in the country, came to us and had tried some of our products and said, we really need help out in Colorado. So we bought a building and converted it into a processing and distribution center. And so we got started out there. One of our competitive advantages has been we're all in the upper Midwest. Our 5 distribution centers are within 3 to 4 hours of the other one. So in produce, obviously, freshness is key. And if we keep inventory around very long, it becomes worthless and you have to throw it out. So we're able to move inventory between warehouses and take it leverage off of sales from different customers. In Colorado, we found that how kind of important that was, because we don't have an avenue to get rid of dying or decaying produce out there. So obviously our shrink was a lot worse, and we had to get less smarter about buying and forecasting what our daily needs are. So next slide. So this is kind of just a snapshot of who we serve. We started, we service customers up in the UP of Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, obviously, both Dakotas, and then we get a little bit into Montana, and then starting in Colorado, we've picked up obviously Colorado, New Mexico, Kansas, and then we're doing a Walmart distribution center in Wyoming. So we've kind of have a long reach in the upper Midwest, but some of the names you might recognize, Coburn's or Cashwise, Super One, Kowalski's, Triggs, I guess. Festivals are big out in Wisconsin. They're a chain of stores, but there's a lot of, our industry's changed also. There's, the little independent, mom and pop grocery stores are all getting bought out or closing. So they're being bought out by chains. So, we do just produce, we're not a full line grocer. So like UNFI or Spartan Nash, those are our competitors that they supply the entire grocery store, not just the produce department. But again, the Davises years ago felt there's a need for that specialty. And so that's what we get to focus on. So, so to our employee owners, what does it mean being ESOP? Well, we've seen a shift over time, and basically is our employees really care about customer service and customer satisfaction. And you'll see employees when they're loading a truck, if they see like a case of something and there's bad tomatoes on the top, they'll actually say something and do something about it, rather than just loading it on a truck and knowing that it's going to probably come back to bite us somewhere in in poor quality. And so that helps. And there's I walk out to in the warehouse and people are saying, well, how are things in Colorado, or how's this? And so they're generally concerned, and which helps from a cost control standpoint. They want obviously they want what's best for the company, and watching costs and stuff. So it's been a good advantage for that, and they all feel like they have skin in the game, and it's changed over time. Early on, they kind of thought, well, they're a young person, they don't retire for a long time, but now that they've worked with people that have left, actually got their money, and they realize, wow, this is a real thing, and the culture is kind of catching on, or I guess getting contagious. So, but we're kind of known for our customer service, and we deliver 7 days a week, and our employees are all part of that, and they all believe it. So.
Well, and Randy, I was just going to interject very quickly. If you've been in ESOPs for 29 years, I would assume that the payout when someone retires could possibly be in the six figures.
Oh, easily, yeah. We have 7-figure payouts. Where, so if timing is everything with the ESOP, I mean, if you were here at the beginning and you're still around, obviously, yeah, you have a very lucrative account, in the $1 million+ balances, which the retirement plan is, I mean, I guess just outstanding. And, we're, like I said, we're in a mature ESOP, so we contribute, we've been contributing 25% of your pay. So basically whatever your W-2 is times 25%, that's what the company puts in and, into your account. So, then this year, we have our ups and downs, mostly ups with our stock value. But depending on expansion and things, sometimes the stock goes down, but I think it's only gone down 3 times in those 29 years, and it just continues to go up. And so we had a really good year last year in 2020. So that on top of a 25% increase, you see some nice increases in your ESOP account. So
exactly.
Especially in the early days, I mean, the graph of our stock value almost went straight up, which to me is not realistic, but employees sure benefited from that. So yeah, there's some very nice payouts. So usually when we talked about these is we do it from a company standpoint, why the benefits to us to be an ESOP. But so this is, from a perspective of why did the Davis family decide to become an ESOP. And so they started talking about an exit strategy. They were in their, probably in their late 50s, mid 50s, I would say, and knew they wanted to do something. And they explored the selling out to other companies. They didn't like that option because there was no guarantee, or, the company might get moved, or the employees could all lose their jobs. And they wanted to reward their long-term employees. So they didn't like those options of selling to outsiders. They were able to, so they sold over in pieces over time, which I show on the next slide, but they were able to stay involved, but yet kind of dial back a little bit by, we're promoting some employees to, key positions so they could dial back, but yet still involved. And they were, both of Gary Davis and Jim Lehr passed on, but they were, right up until they passed away, they were coming to the office, not as much. And then they did a very good job of taking a back seat, but they were there for advice or just their opinions, we loved it. It was great to have them around. So, and they knew that it engages employees. They wanted everybody to have a piece of the pie. And they were able to, get initial return, cash out early on for their first share. And then as the company's value increased, and then the next chunk they sold, they got more for. And then again, the last, the final payout, they get the fair market value like anybody else. So they actually got more, I think, for their last 25% than they did for the first 50 for sure. So. And then they just love the tax and retirement plan benefits to their employees. They had a profit sharing plan prior to the ESOP. So they obviously knew the value of the retirement plan. And I guess that's the one thing I'd say would be known for is our great retirement plan. We just had to recently start charging employees for health insurance. It's still very inexpensive, but we've only been charging for about, I don't know, maybe 5 years now, but health insurance got to be too expensive and costly for us. So we didn't want it to negatively affect the ESOP. So that was one of the things too. It's like, well, it's their money. If we spend it on health insurance, that's what they want. So next slide. So again, the family they were able to stay on the board and keep management positions. We paid them as consultants for a few years, and then we basically just quit paying them. But like I said, they came in anyway. So they were able to maintain positions on the board and continue to get some pay as consultants. But, and for the first initial years after they first sold out to the ESOP, they were obviously employees and they weren't members of the ESOP, but they were able to keep their position. So, and then, like Steve said, it's flexible. They sold their shares. They have it highlighted 51% in 91, and then another 25% in 97, and then finally in 2008. So they were able to get more value over time. Was that my last slide, Sue? Or I went through it.
I think it is.
I went through it fast. I don't know if there's any questions or not.
I just have one question or comment, I guess, to point out too, you know, with the tax savings, when you're 100% and you're an S Corp, you know, we always talk about that allows, once you pay down the loan, that allows you to expand your business, hire more people, maybe acquire other companies. Has that been part of your process when through that tax savings?
Yep. And that's the big benefit is we're required to, we need to reinvest in ourselves. There's obviously, we have ESOP obligations that we have to cover, and then replacing equipment and fixing buildings. And then kind of the third thing is the expansion, you know, to allow growth. Sometimes there isn't enough to do that. So and it has to be the right opportunity. But yeah, if we weren't able to reinvest that money that we'd be spending on income taxes, I mean, the value wouldn't have gone up like it has. So, so that's a huge advantage for us. So, and we generally use it just reinvesting in ourselves, like, you know, for fixed capital additions and stuff.
Great. Well, I have a slide up that has our contact information on here, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see everybody see each other again, and then, you know, be able to ask any other questions or discussions if you want to stay on. Like I said, I'm recording the presentation. I've also sent a PDF version to Chet to share. But is there any other items you want to discuss or maybe ask a few more questions? We'd be happy to entertain those.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that, yep, we are a little bit past time here. So understand if you need to drop off, but also everyone's shown a willingness to stick around if anybody has questions. I did see Mike also added one more question for Randy in the chat.
You want to read that for him? I don't think, Andy, can you see, Randy, can you see that question?
Well, I saw something pop up. I can't.
Yeah.
I don't see that.
Sure. Yeah. So Michael asks, actually, you know what, Mike, I'm going to ask you to read it.
Ask your own question.
Yeah. So keeping rural grocery stores is obviously a concern of many. I suppose there's a lot of people in the urban area who really don't care, but
Yeah.
I'm an urban person. I like to have towns, but Extension, the U of M Extension has an interest in the preservation of rural grocery stores. And Randy, your firm serves rural grocery stores, obviously, as well as, you know, Twin Cities Metro, St. Cloud, et cetera. So I've seen deals in some of the worker co-ops where vendors such as yourselves have taken some investment in certain rural grocery stores where they want to sell to their workers, and they have to assemble that financing package, right? And they don't want to ask the workers to pay too much, like Steve alluded to. So for the right rural grocery store in Minnesota, Wisconsin, who's going to sell to an EOT or a worker co-op and keep that rural grocery store, is that something that potentially Russ Davis would look at being part of the packaging to keep the customer and keep the store there?
Yeah, I don't know if we would be able to do like help with the financing. I know like some of our salespeople and stuff have helped, you know, as far as just doing some brainstorming or consulting. We could certainly check into that because you're right, we do have an interest in maintaining those rural grocery stores. But I don't, like you said, with a reinvesting, I'm not sure how much we could invest, but it's always an option or an idea. Very good idea.
I think there's a grocery store out in an island in Maine that became a worker cooperative, and I think vendor financing was part of that deal. I'll look for it and see if I can find the name.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That is an interesting question. There are a lot of grocery stores, including a couple of the biggest ESOPs in the country that are employee owned. There is a chapter in the Minnesota statutes that was specifically added in 2003 to allow cooperatives to not only be owned by the members, but to include some outside investor members. There are limitations on how much of that can happen, but essentially up to 85% of the ownership and the profits could be to investors like, Russ Davis that might want to help create the co-op. But of course, for a company like Russ Davis, that's a very serious decision to make, and something that their board would have to spend a lot of time looking at before they chose that as a growth strategy.
Yeah, I'll certainly look into that, I guess, or it's a great idea. So.
Randy, would you like to follow up with Michael on that a little bit more?
I could, sure.
Yep, that'd be great.
Mike, why don't you drop your email in the chat?
And I can also share that with Randy. I have the registration list, so all the emails were in there, correct? Oh, he just
Yes,
said
they were. Yep,
okay.
and he put it in there as well. So
Okay. And we're going to follow up with Eric and Ben. I'm going to put you in touch with an attorney that has more information about how employee ownership trusts are set up, so that you can explore that a little bit further and get some of your questions answered.
great, Ben or Eric, any final questions before we sign off for today?
No, I didn't have any, but thank you very much for the webinar. It's been great. And mainly for me, it's just great to know that there's this resource now. I wish I'd found it a while ago, but this is great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're not the first person to say that, actually. So, so that's really it's rewarding, because that's exactly why we were created, so that we could be that resource and no strings attached. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. And thank you for your time today. And thank you, Steve Eide and Randy, for giving your expertise and your stories. It's what we really want to be able to share with Minnesota. And thank you, Chet, for allowing us.
For joining in. Everyone else who joined today. And, I see like we're down just a few, but Antonio, Michael, if you think your communities you're working in would benefit from hearing directly from Sue and these folks, I will send out their email addresses with the PowerPoint. Feel free to reach out to them. I think they're a great resource. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds great.